Young Tom Natsworthy's adventure starts when a hooded assassin attacks his hero, Thaddeus Valentine. Desperately wanting to be a hero, Tom gives chase. The assassin turns out to be the hideously, grotesquely ugly girl. Seriously, Tom goes on and on about how ugly this girl is. Her name is Hester Shaw. Before she jumps to her death, she tells Tom that Valentine is the one who disfigured her. When Valentine finds out that Tom has seen Hester, he pushes him down the waste chute to his death. It's a town-eat-town world. This is the podcast that gets lit, your Boozy Book Club, episode number 4. Let's get lit. Alrighty, everyone. Thank you and welcome back to the 4th episode of the podcast that gets lit. I'm Luke. I'm here with Bailey. We are drinking. We are going to talk about the first book that both of us had read before deciding to come up with this list. This is the only book on this list that we've both read.
Go us.
I know, right? And it's actually...
I don't think it was intentional.
I think there's a bit of a story behind why, because we both discovered this book at the same exact time, which is really atypical for the things that we read, right? I mean, we both come from slightly different, varied backgrounds of books, which is great, and I love the different avenues that we can pull different character things from. But this book, we together in the movie theater for Crimes of Grindelwald saw the trailer for Mortal Engines, which was coming out shortly thereafter. And we were like, holy shit, that looks like a really cool thing.
What is this and why have I not heard about it?
Yeah, how have we not heard of this? It sounds awesome. It looks cool. And so then we both also independently read it at different times. So I think that's maybe what makes it the reason that both of us had read this before coming to the podcast. But we are recording here on April 20th of 2020, quarantine, lockdown, central. And this book came out in November 16th, 2001. Not 20anything, 2001.
2001.
2001.
I'd also like to point out that today is 420, and while I don't partake, our podcast is about getting lit, so...
Yeah.
Happy 420 if you celebrate.
If that's your thing, welcome.
It's not our kind of lit.
Yeah, different kind of lit. We used 2 of the other 3 typical versions of lit, but being literature and drinking. For
Speaking of which, what are you drinking?
I am going to continue my bottle of Woodford Reserve, which has a really bad glare on it right there, and it's reversed to everyone that's not Bailey because that's just how this program works, and I'm frustrated.
You're
but
just
it's
not
okay.
special.
I sure have tried. I sure have tried to figure this thing out, but it's just not going to happen. So continuing my bourbon bottle. How about you?
Nice. I have a concoction I've made. I have this orange peach vodka that I've been trying to figure out something to do with. Because it's not that great to drink straight. Tried it that way, was not a fan. So I brewed some sweet tea over the weekend, and I mixed it with the vodka, and
There you go.
it is wonderful.
Sounds like that probably works pretty well. So cheers. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. So this is actually in terms of what we've talked about, a pretty short book. And to me, it feels pretty short. And maybe it's just because there's like, I don't know, 12 big scenes or something like that, like kind of chunks. And a lot of action.
That way.
A lot of action almost throughout, I'd say. But it's 326 pages in its original printing from the UK. I think the author, Philip Reeve, who we actually haven't said. I don't know why that's not written anywhere, but it's by Philip Reeve. He's from Brighton, UK, so very, very British, and it shows up. This is mostly set in London, so the audiobook itself is 8 hours and 57 minutes, and I thought the narrator did a pretty good job. Nothing too egregious that bothered me, aside from every single time we hear the name Hester Shaw. It took me until I saw the subtitles for the screenshots of the movie that I realized it's actually Hester Shaw and not Hester Shore, because it very much sounds like Hester Shore every single time. No matter which character is saying it, it was there every single time. So
see, I didn't feel that, and maybe it's because I read the synopsis beforehand or something.
Yeah, I definitely didn't at all.
I honestly can't remember before I listened to it the first time. I feel like I've just always known that her name is Hester Shaw, and maybe I just understand the narrator a little better. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I did not have that issue. So that's interesting that you point that out.
It just every time, especially when Shrike says it, he's like really elongates Hester Shaw. I'm like, Hester Shore, oh, okay. And then I see it, like, why would they change it to Shaw? Like, why? And then I looked it up, I was like, no, I'm fucking wrong. Whoops.
Maybe you just need to clear out your ears.
I've listened to this book and the other ones in this series. It stays the same, no matter what time of the day. Anyway, so this is a fun book. I couldn't find a dedication written anywhere. I don't have a hard copy of it, so I don't really know. But the Goodreads synopsis goes, it was a dark, blustery afternoon in spring, and the city of London was chasing a small mining town across the dried-out bed of the old North Sea. The great traction city of London has been skulking in the hills to avoid the bigger, faster, hungrier cities loose in the great hunting ground. But now, the sinister plans of Lord Mayor Magnus Crome can finally unfold. Thaddeus Valentine, London's head historian and adored famous archaeologist, and his lovely daughter Catherine are down in the gut when the young assassin with the black scarf strikes toward his heart. Saved by the quick intervention of Tom, a lowly third-class apprentice racing after the fleeing girl, Tom suddenly glimpses her hideous face. I'm telling you, this girl is ugly. It just continues to talk about that.
In case it wasn't clear.
It talks about it over and over again. Scarred from forehead to jaw, nose a smashed stump, a single eye glaring back at him. Look at what your Valentine did to me, she screams. Ask him what he did to Hester Shaw. And with that, she jumps down the waste chute to her death. Minutes later, Tom finds himself tumbling down the same chute and stranded in the outcountry, a sea of mud scored by huge caterpillar tracks of cities like the one now steaming off over the horizon. In a stunning literary debut, Philip Reeve has created a painful, dangerous, unforgettable adventure story of surprises set in a dark, utterly original world fueled by municipal Darwinism and betrayal. So, there's a lot of things going on in this book. What would you say is the genre? Because I feel like it kind of covers a couple different things.
It's almost like science fantasy, I would say, is a good mashup of genres.
Mm-hmm. I definitely think there's a pretty large air of steampunk throughout,
Mm-hmm.
with the high but very limited technology kind of throughout, and
Well,
just the way people are described, and like uh, the clothes are all described. It has a very noir or very Victorian type feel to it. It's a cool mishmash, and that seems to be something that I get from it.
it's really funny that you mentioned the high but limited technology, because on my re-listen today, I'm going through and there's this bit where they're talking about compact discs for or for computers,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Well, do you think there's anything valuable on it?" I don't know, but even if there was, we couldn't read it because computers back then, they were so much more powerful than what we have now, and we don't have anything that could possibly process that.
Right.
It
Right.
was just extremely funny to me to think of, like, even how much more advanced things are today, and that, who knows how many years in the future this is, and they can't even read a CD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is 1,000 years after what's called the 60-minute war. And I don't, that's supposed to be set in now-ish times, present. So about 1,000 years in the future is when this is
Mm-hmm.
set or so. And yeah, the Thousand Years' War seems like it was a massive nuclear holocaust type thing, just bombs
The
going off.
60-minute war.
What did I say?
1,000 years.
The 60-minute war 1,000 years ago seemed like it was something that we're totally capable of, and I think there's a point to that of this is things this is a true kind of dystopian thing that could occur if people are done with the responsibilities of technology that we have. And the really most interesting thing is they don't have things like computers, but they have technologies that allow them to put entire cities, huge, vast, miles wide cities, on tracks, and they can drive them across the landscapes, right? I mean, London goes from the UK all over Europe, and it's just think of that. It's ridiculous. Like, to us, that's
It's
totally,
mind blowing.
yeah, it's unfathomable. But they can't figure out how to make a goddamn computer to play a CD. Like, it's so weird that there's that dichotomy of limitations on what they can do, and I think it creates a lot of interesting technology talk for sure. Um,
Mm-hmm.
which, if you want, we can go ahead and jump into our themes for this book.
Absolutely.
And I will say that the theme list that I pulled for this book comes from shmoop.com, which is very fun to say. So while you're at home
Schmoop.
listening to this, say it with me, shmoop.com. And I've taken what they had and kind of combined them combined them to a couple groups of themes just to quicken this up a little bit. But the first one, since we were already talking about it, would be technology and modernization. There's, like we said, different rates of technology going all over the place. And so, what one thing that, there's a couple questions in here that maybe we'll use to guide our conversation if you want. We'll see how that goes. How have the traction cities benefited humanity in this age? How has the same technology been destructive to society? So what do you think? How has this benefited what they're capable of doing in their time period?
I mean, it lets you see, like, more far off reaches of the world, and you can, you know, travel from city to city relatively easily, it seems like. But I think there's a huge downfall to what this does to their society. Um, there's bits and pieces where they mention that obviously the cities eat other cities. This is how the book starts out: is London is going on the attack after a smaller town, and just the fact that like it's imperialism to the next degree almost, it
Mm-hmm.
seems like, where you're not only are you taking over a city, you are completely devouring it and just wiping it off the face of the earth.
Oh yeah. And I mean, there's a certain level of, well, I guess we're looking at the positive things first before we get into maybe the destructive portion of it. Yeah, I mean, it allows you to consistently basically go after, take your city to the natural resources, right? Or the artificial resources to repurpose them for your own use. It simplifies that, you know, trade chain. You go to the source when you can, and it creates it's more of a hunter society than it is a gatherer society. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think, at least for efficiency's sake, it's probably more efficient for that, but it's still like, what are the resources you're using to drive this thing around? I mean, think of like how many miles per gallon they're never gonna get. So the other part of that is obviously, what are the most destructive things about that? How has the same technology been destructive? And I think it's pretty clear that it's a town eat town world, and it's very much a almost raping and pillaging mindset. And big fish gets the little worm, and guess what? No one's taking out the big fish unless two come head to head. But it just seems like a really long term metaphor for superpowers being able to gain power and just gain power, and there's no checks and balances on it really, because they're better off staying away from each other and just eating little fish until there are none. So it sounds, your way of life is literally taking somebody else's home. Like, that's not too good.
So, um, I've got to ask, what do you like imagine in your mind when these cities are eating other cities? Like, how does that go down?
Oh, so I haven't seen the movie yet, but I won't lie, I've kind of seen it because I took the screenshots and it was on while I was at work, so I glimpsed some things. So at the very opening scene, which we'll talk about, hopefully we'll be able to do the movie review this upcoming weekend or sometime very soon and do a commentation over it. But I kind of like the way that they did it. We'll talk about that when we get there. But it's the way I just really imagine it is, I mean, London's enormous. I mean, it's a huge city for us now, and this is a consolidated but still like big enough to hold a huge, massive cathedral like in the middle of it, and it's 7 tiers or so tall, which just makes it feel like Minas Tirith on wheels from Lord of the Rings to me. But it's probably more expansive than that. So something that's that large and it's set on tracks, how it seems like you could either run over the top of something and then like have arms that come down and scoop things up, or there could be like, think of like a big person carrier military jet, especially the ones that have the parachuting doors that back up. So basically you're driving forward and you
Mm-hmm.
have like a drop down in front that it's just like, well, if we're going faster than them or they break down, like they're just gonna get gobbled up. So I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. Just from the moment that I read about like cities literally eating other cities, I just imagine like it the buildings like almost lift up off of the top of the base of the earth of this traction city, and it like opens up this huge Pac-Man mouth and just
It's very much like Monster Book of Monsters.
yes, that is the only thing I could ever think of.
I'm not going to say that's impossible for what they're doing. I mean, hell, anything is possible. I think the other thing that's really odd about, especially like that opening scene, is the crowds that run out and cheer for this, right? You know, with a total lack of empathy for the people that are on board the, you know, smaller town that's going to get devoured and then subjugated. We find basically put into slavery, and we see many versions of slavery and everything, but it almost seems like you have to have that kind of manpower influx all the time to be able to run these machines, right?
Mm-hmm.
That forced, you know, work. So I don't know. It's a weird world, man. it's a weird world. So the other really, there's two more things about technology that I think are worth talking about, and that is this Medusa, this huge weapon, right? That is a really pivotal thing about what this whole story is about. And we learn that Hester Shaw's mother, Pandora, finds this evidence. She was also an archaeologist that used to work with Thaddeus Valentine, and she finds this Medusa thing, which seems to be what's called an old tech weapon. This may have been involved in the 60-minute war. But the question I'm going to read from Schmoop.com, why does Magnus Chrome insist on using Medusa even though he doesn't really understand it? What do you think?
Because it's this big bad thing that's supposed to be like incredibly powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And who doesn't want that kind of power even if you don't understand how it works?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely gets new toy happy with it, right? And hey, we have the
He's like your
big bad.
typical dude, bro.
He's a dude, bro, man, right? No, he really is. He's got this shiny new thing that is a total game changer that anybody has ever seen in this version of the Earth. And yeah, I mean, it takes out another huge city with one shot, right? I mean, and it's just a truly devastating weapon that you have that, you're the only one that has that. Guess what? You were already top dog. You just changed the game.
Game over.
Pretty much. And he kind of goes really crazy after he has that even further power added to his arsenal. Talking about taking over planets and moons and other galaxies.
Just, really inflates the ego.
Yeah. So the other thing I think that we can quickly talk about is the airships that we see. This is, I think, one of the more steampunky type things to me, at least. It's the use of dirigibles and blimps and kites and other forms of not necessarily airplane type flight.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a favorite of these at all? Because we see a
handful. They were all
handful.
really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think what I found most interesting was they specifically mention, you know, it's not like those big old airplanes that defied the laws of the Earth.
Right. Heavier than air flight. They just can't fathom that, and that's again where it comes back to how are you able to do these? It's a lot of like, it's amazing what you can come up with when your hands are tied. If you don't have certain things, you have to find other ways of doing that, and it's kind of an alternate history version of technology. So I think it's pretty neat that we get to see some of these for sure. The
interesting what they come up with.
Yeah, the Jenny Hanover is probably the one we see the most, and that is Anna Fang's cool kind of scarlet red ship that she built herself, which is cool. She's a pretty cool character, I think. Yeah, so technology is just runs rampant through this story. It allows pirate towns to literally drive their small towns around, get eaten up by a bigger one, take over from the inside, and then now they have a bigger town, which is
That's
something
the way
we
to
see.
do it.
Right? Hey, act like you're a little fish and then take the big fish over. We only see it once, but that has to happen more and more, right? It's like a Trojan horse almost.
I mean, at least when your town is getting eaten, you're not dying. Like, it's not complete end game here. It's just, well, I lost my house.
Well, it depends on where you're at. Certain places we saw later on, towns were getting eaten up, and it was just, hey, find the people that are worth saving and putting to work and kill everyone else. And so we do see that too, much more
In the
limited.
process of your town getting eaten is what I meant. It's
Yeah,
not quite
it's not like
literal
trash
eating.
compactor,
Yes.
instant trash compactor. Yeah. So the next set of themes that we have here, I think this kind of goes right along with that pretty well. Violence and courage. So, like we said, I think the technology allows for this world to not really be policed very well. It's a lot easier to have a bit of a Wild West feel, a bit of a, yeah, barbarism kind of going on, and it's a pretty violent world to live in. And I mean, I can imagine people are terrified pretty much all the time of, because you can't be safe in your own neighborhood because a bigger neighborhood's coming for you, right? It's a total mind-bending version of what it means to feel safe at home.
Yeah, there really is no safe. I mean, even if you feel safe in the town that you live in, what's to say that there's not going to be another town that's just around the corner that's coming for you? You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And along with that, we see a lot of characters that are either forced into being courageous, kind of heroic situations. And who would you say exemplifies courage the most in this?
Um, I don't know. I feel like I really liked what um, Catherine did.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Just trying to get to the bottom of things, no matter the cost,
Mm-hmm.
personally.
Yeah, I think so Catherine is Thaddeus Valentine's daughter, who kind of throughout this story learns the darker side of her father, the really cutthroat individual that he has been forced to on her for her behalf, right? And he thinks he's a bit of a. It seems like he's a bit of a ends justifying the means. Like, yeah, I had to do some dirty things, but it's almost. I didn't really think about it this way when I was reading, but it's kind of like a mafia mentality of it doesn't matter what you have to end up doing. What matters is taking care of your family and making sure that the people that come after you are better off. And I don't know. I think she is probably one of the underrated characters because it's maybe not as action packed as being out in the out country, being outside of London. But the things that she has to go up with is, really really set in their ways. What's the word I'm looking for? Ingrained uh, corruption and ingrained. I mean, hierarchy systems that she's kind of an outsider to, and it's for me, it's a lot easier for her to get caught in what she's doing, but she still powers through and makes it happen.
Yeah, the politics are really against her from the start.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, by the end of it, she pretty much is the one that saves almost the world, right? I I think that's definitely true. As she's the one that ends up planting the bomb, sacrificing herself to take out Medusa, which in turn destroys all of London's track city. But you know, uh, the way that they were being led, maybe it was maybe it was the way to go.
Sometimes it's just the way that cookie crumbles.
Yeah, those stale cookies. So I have an option of 3 questions along with courage. Give me number 1, 2, or 3.
3.
3. If Hester has nothing to lose, can she be considered courageous, or does courage depend on danger and sacrifice?
You can still be courageous if you have nothing to lose. I mean, isn't that the point when you're most courageous almost? You really have nothing left to give up, and so you're not doing it for yourself at that point. You're just doing it for the good of the people.
But if you're not afraid because you have nothing to lose, are you? I mean, are you really afraid? And is it? It's basically
You
just
can
comes down
still
to
be
how do you?
afraid even if you have nothing to lose. Scary shit is still scary.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree with you, but to me, I think the heart of this question is I do think it takes having something to overcome for it to be courageous, right? Like my boy Ned Stark always said, like he said it once in early in book one, but you know, Bran
Always
asks him,
early in book one.
you know, can can I be courageous if I'm afraid? And Ned says that's the only time you can be courageous is if you're afraid, or else it's either ignorance or stupidity. And he doesn't say it that way, but I think that's kind of implied that in this, I think the way the question is written could be a little clearer, but I think it's is she going on ignorance isn't really the right word either, but is she going like her lack of care about herself, is it still bravery that she is able to do what she's doing? I don't think it really matters
Mm-hmm.
if she has nothing to lose. We know she's okay with the idea of dying. She actually asks for it at one point, which we'll get to, um, but is restrained by Tom. So, I don't know. I think she's still a courageous character in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's not always about necessarily being afraid for yourself, but just being afraid for others, I think.
Mm-hmm. So one last question on you know what? Let's check out what violence has. Let's see what that has. One, two, three, or four.
Lucky number three.
Number three again. Why doesn't Catherine decide to use violence to solve her problems? Is it because of her upper class upbringing, or is it because of something else? I feel like she is a very empathetic character, and maybe she didn't have to learn. She she is upper class, which provided her certain educational benefits that other people wouldn't have. So maybe her deductive reasoning and all of that tied with her empathy just encourage her that there are other ways of doing it. I don't know. What are you? Any thoughts on that?
Um, I mean, given who her father is, we kind of know that she might be predisposed to it, I guess, despite his keeping things from her and sort of really sheltering her from that sort of part of life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but even I think society in general, just the way with this municipal Darwinism, really um, numbs people to violence in the world. I mean, it's just normal. It's part of everyday life. So I think that it's really just Catherine is a good person, and she has these morals that, despite what society is showing her, she knows that violence isn't the answer.
Mm-hmm. I definitely, yeah. Her and Bevis Pod, I think, kind of fall into a. They really connect on that of feeling the cost of human life more than most people in this society. It seems like, especially when they kind of first meet, or when she goes back down to the gut to find him, and there's just this poor prisoner who's a slave and is literally being worked to death and almost poisoned because of the malnutrition that he's going through. And Bevis Pod, who's just this really, really low class worker in the engineerium, just feels for this guy. And I think Catherine sees that, and I think she ends up falling in love with him. I mean, by the end of it, she certainly has a thing for him, and they just seem like a pretty good pair. And a couple of peaches too. So
Throw in an apple,
maybe a banana. Who knows?
a mango.
Mango. I had mango and pineapple smoothie this afternoon for lunch. It was delicious.
That sounds delightful.
Almond milk and spinach. It's good. It's good stuff. All right, you ready for our next theme?
Absolutely.
We kind of already were touching on this too. So look at this, man. It's right in order.
We're ahead of
We
ourselves.
are killing it. It's almost like we scripted none of this. Society, class, and appearances. I think all three of these things are really ingrained in, especially the London side of what we see here, at least. I think there's certainly a difference between the people inside London and maybe other big towns, but we don't see much of them here, and how Hester grew up in the out country on land, which is just mind-boggling for anyone that's in London. Like,
it's like Waterworld on dry land.
right, right. And whenever jumping back a little bit, but whenever Tom gets pushed down the waste chute towards the very beginning, which is a pretty big turn of events, right? That's really where the story kicks in. Like, holy,
I mean, he's shocked when it happens.
Absolutely.
Like Hester jumps off, and he's like, "Oh my god, she just committed suicide!"
Right.
And then lo and behold, I'm getting pushed off right behind her. I'm gonna die
by my hero. And then when he wakes up in the morning, or a little time later, and he's like, "Oh, what is this? Oh no, it's mud." He just like freaks out a little bit. He's like, "I never thought I would touch
Organic
mud."
matter.
I thought that was pretty funny. So, society, class, and appearances. Whichever one of those you want to jump into first, I'll let you lead on that one.
Well, society and class. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, the society is really what is lending the violence to the people. It's such a disastrous way of living. I feel like this municipal Darwinism, where we're just gonna survival of the fittest, and the biggest town is gonna be the victor, and eventually there's not gonna be any towns left for people
Absolutely, yeah.
to eat.
I think another important part to that, and I think you were kind of getting to it, is this separation of the classes. The higher up you are, the more distant you are from seeing that, right? We have some of the historians that go down and look for collectible things, right? Some old tech that can have value. But like we see when all of these upper class people run out to, makes me feel like they're running off to like the banister, like up to the railing of the Titanic, and they're watching the iceberg come, and they're like cheering for it, but they don't realize what it means necessarily. And the further away you are from the dirty work of it, the more separated you are from the true outcomes for the other people involved, from your side and their side.
I just drew a parallel between the society here and the tiers of society in the Hunger Games.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, you've got like the rulers are basically like the people living in the capital. They just take enjoyment and think it's a fun game watching everybody, eat these other cities, watching children murder each other. Then you've got like the middle tiers where where like they're not in the higher ups, they still have some bad things going on, but they're relatively well to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the lower tiers where like Katniss lives, and everyone is just dying
just
and starving. And yeah, they are the tiny towns that are being eaten.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an incredibly well put comparison. I mean, I think it absolutely applies for sure. And the further up those rungs you are, the more distant from the problem you are. And until someone brings it to your attention. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good comparison. So we have 3 questions to choose from for society and class. Which is your choose?
Stick with lucky number 3.
London would be unable to function without the hard work of the lower tier. Why did they put these people in such harsh conditions with little to no health care? It's the opposite of health care, in my opinion. Like, it is incredibly awful work, and they're literally figuring out ways to feed them shit. They are repurposing human feces to become an edible food. And
it's killing people.
But that's just a slight setback, Bailey. That's just a slight setback.
They'll figure it out.
That's exactly what they say.
This question feels oddly on the nose for society these days.
I think there's a
Um,
lot of big picture things going on in this. A bit
yeah,
of a
no, I
commentary
mean,
by the author.
why wouldn't you, if you're a rich person, someone up in the higher tiers of society, why wouldn't you want to do the bare minimum for the people who are providing things for you? If I can just get away with, giving them sustenance to keep them alive and they'll still keep doing their job, why am I going to do anything else?
Yeah. Why do I have to pay for
Why will
that?
I go above and beyond?
Yeah. What have they done for me lately?
Except, everything.
So the other part of this is appearances, which how often do you feel like appearances are mentioned in like character introductions in this
Oh,
book?
I mean that Hester Shaw.
Grotesquely ugly.
Which, I mean, granted, I have not seen the film, but the actress who plays Hester Shaw
Is a
is
babe.
also, she is a babe.
She's a babe.
She is in the um, Apple TV series C,
Ah, okay.
and oh my goodness, she is gorgeous.
It's not
So,
grotesquely ugly in that.
not grotesquely
Hmm.
ugly, and I just, now that
Disappointing.
I know that, I can't get into even watching the movie and thinking about, oh well, she's supposed to be ugly, but I'm just thinking of Magra from C, and that's not working.
Yeah, so I didn't know who she was. She's Icelandic, and we'll talk about this when we
Hmm.
get to the movie. But she was in a show on Stars called Da Vinci's Demons, and I was like, I don't know who this is. And then I looked up the pictures, and I was like, oh, looks nothing alike. Like, either way, we'll get there. But yeah, I mean, like every character, and I think it's usually from Tom's perspective, Tom Natsworthy, that we get more focus on appearances than others. Well, also Catherine too. When she sees Bevis Pod, it's like that's all she can think of. It's like, wow, he's surprisingly not atrocious looking. Like it's over and over again, which I'm not saying is going to hurt, their chance at a relationship, but it seems to be like in every character description of, oh, this was what's his name? I'm gonna look at our character list really quickly because I can't remember his name. He was the guy that captures them and doesn't. It's like Orm Rayland and his wife, and the character descriptions, the physical characteristics that we get are very seemingly judgmental based as opposed to just describing what we see. If like a lot of books you get, oh, this is what the person looks like, and you get a lot of description, but it's not necessarily judgmentally done. And maybe that's just the author's perspective. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Honestly, it could go either way. And yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of books I read these days where they almost don't even describe the character. Like they don't want you, unless it is important to a plot, or I don't know, this character is discriminated against because of they've got green skin. I don't know. Um, but I feel like we're getting away from people specifically calling out things
Mm-hmm.
about their characters, and maybe that's for potential future dramatization in film or television, that it could just be up to interpretation, hire whoever you want.
Mm-hmm. And
um
so this book came out in 2001. That it could be a product of when it came out, right? I mean, that's 19 years ago, and I feel like the societal norms around those things have very much changed in the last decade, at least. I
oh,
mean,
absolutely.
so that's where like I wonder if it's just us reading it now and are noticing that, or if it's more of if this is an author that grew up reading science fiction books that have the really hot, sexy women on the covers, and that's just kind of the style that it's trying to fit into. I don't know. So I don't really know much about Philip Reeve specifically, but it seems to be really important in this book, at least, that appearances matter. Especially making a good first impression. And I don't know. And maybe there's a really hard set line to show that it doesn't really matter, since certain people focus on it, but then we see Hester, who is, let me get this across to you, grotesquely ugly, and it's remarked on all the time. That
In case you forgot.
that it's supposed to show that, even if you're ugly, you can still do great things, and so it's maybe a cautionary tale of don't judge the book by its cover. But Hester has her own flaws, which we'll certainly still get to, I think. So 3 questions I have. Pick one of them.
Number 1.
Oh, you game changer. Would Tom have liked Catherine as much, and would Catherine have liked Bevis Pod as much if Catherine and Bevis weren't so blindingly attractive? We kind of got into that a little bit. So do you think it caused the attraction? I mean, I don't think it's hurting.
It definitely doesn't hurt. I don't know that it caused it. I don't think too much.
I think
it's definitely an attributing factor.
I think it's a pretty big one because it opens the door to thinking that way quicker, in the way these 2 sets of relationships are done, which I'm so glad there wasn't really a love triangle. Oh man, I would have thrown this book away. But it's just kid has crush on girl. Girl thinks kid dies. She was liking him because her dad tried to kill him, legitimately, no finger quotes.
Goodbye,
he literally tried to kill him. And then girl meets other like-minded individual who happens to be attractive, and I think that mental process gets going quicker when you have that physical, attraction. So I think they would have liked each other the same amount. It just wouldn't have happened so quickly, is maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it.
So let's do one more of these questions, 2 or 3.
2.
Why does Tom constantly tell us how ugly Hester is? Is she really ugly? Like, is she actually ugly?
I mean, I think part of it is probably just a way to remind us of what Valentine did to her.
I think that's a pretty good point. And in this, along the length of this story, we find out that not only did Valentine do that to her, it's almost a sure thing that she, Hester, is in fact Valentine's daughter, which she didn't know about and Catherine didn't know about. And it seems like, I'm sure Pandora, Hester's mother, knew about it, but she remarried or married after the fact, and that guy adopted Hester. So I think what you said there is a really great point, that it's a reminder of she has been, almost mortally wounded, right? It was intended to kill her at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a reminder that this incredibly handsome and famous Thaddeus Valentine, who we also see a really personal side to, is still a bit of a monster in his own way. And it's unfortunate that this girl has to live with that for the rest of her life, and there are no ramifications for Thaddeus except for positive ones. He's promoted to the number 1 dude in the Historians Guild over people that are much more qualified, much more tenure and experience. And because of this, and basically because of bringing the technology that he was able to find, he gets a bump here. So I think that's a really good point in it. I doubt she's really that ugly. She's just, when you grow up in a world full of really attractive people, and then you see someone that has a disfigurement that you never see before, it's going to stand out to you. And I think that's maybe what Tom's dealing with.
It's almost like when you're a child and you see like a war veteran that's missing a limb, and
Right,
it really stands out to you because for the most part you don't see that in your everyday life as a child.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, especially for children, which is based in ignorance. 95% of the time, children are just ignorant by the true sense of the term. They just don't have that life experience. And
Mm.
ignorance, sometimes you want to find out more. And then you're told by your parent who maybe doesn't know the right way to approach the situation because, oh, that's rude to ask him or her about her missing hand. But maybe it's drawing attention to those things that can make that person feel more human, right? It's connecting on those things and not belittling them at all. It's more trying to connect with them on a level that likely nobody else does. I mean, at large at least. And I think it's important to have those uncomfortable conversations sometimes, and I think the person, if you do it the right way, would appreciate having the opportunity to talk about it. But that's just me. I don't know. So, our next set of themes here, and I grouped these four together. We have friendship, guilt, admiration, and blame. We see some friendships develop. I'd say Bevis and Catherine, a really begrudging relationship for a long time, as with Tom and Hester. We see some married couples. We see Hester using past connections to get in good with the pirate guy, which is a whole thing. We have Hester and Shrike, who I found out in these notes from Schmoop, the American version, which is not what the audiobook is, changed his name to Grike. And I was like, how are you writing this wrong? Why is this a thing? But apparently there was a book that came out in the late 80s. Yeah, Hyperion novels by Dan. Oh, where was it? Where was it? Come on, come on, come on. Dan Simmons. So the Hyperion series, there's a character named Shrike that apparently was well known here. So they changed it to Grike, and that's kind of ridiculous.
That's just unacceptable. That's like right along the lines of Philosopher's Stone and Sorcerer's Stone.
Yeah. But it's also
I
funny.
said it.
He was originally called Shrek, Max Shrek, Shreck. And this was from the author. He goes, he was originally Shrek. He was called Shrek originally. I guess that would have been worse. I think I heard something about the Shrek film coming out and changed it for that for that reason. I can't remember. So I think Shrek is Shrek. I think Shrek is a great movie, and I think Shrike is a very interesting character. So Shrike is what's called a stalker, and he is very much a cyborg, part human, part robot, and seemingly can't be killed. Any
Yeah,
thoughts
like
on
a
him? And
reanimated dead person?
yeah, yeah. So already dead, and then is reanimated by technology. So they're not really alive, and it's zombie cyborg. I mean, really, right? And is incredibly powerful, strong,
Yeah.
dangerous. Has blades for hands.
Terrifying.
Pretty terrifying. Glowing green eyes. Um, yeah, a pretty sinister dude. And he basically, after Pandora Shaw was killed by Thaddeus Valentine, finds young Hester and raises her alongside his weird, like, mechanical dummies that he also collects. And yeah, so what are your thoughts on their friendship or relationship? Is it a friendship? What do you think?
um, I think in a way it is. I mean, really, he took her in.
Mm-hmm.
That clearly wasn't something that he had to do. He felt compelled to. So clearly there was some sort of connection when she was first taken in by him. Um, but it's interesting to see how quickly, I guess, he kind of turns on her when he starts hunting them.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's different than anything I think that a normal human relationship would be.
Yeah, and I think so. Whenever Hester and Tom, by proxy, run away from London, Tom's consistently wanting to get back. Thaddeus Valentine wants to go after them and confirm that they're dead because they should have been dead, likely, but they're on soft ground, and so they both survive. And Magnus Crome, who's top dog, Lord Mayor of this huge attraction city, sends Shrike instead of Valentine because he has other jobs for Valentine to do. And Shrike basically is going to kill Hester so that he can reanimate her. And that's what he wants. She doesn't know that until way later. She just thinks he's coming after to kill him, to kill her. And at first she's like, "You're not going to kill me." Like, "No, not really, though." And he goes, "Oh, yeah." Like, "I'm going to kill you." But I think some of that is his long-term, his heart's desire, right? To have her with him eternally. They can both be this undead cyborg thing. And to him, they're like two peas in a pod, right? Not pun intended, because Bevis Pod's not involved here. But I think it's a unique relationship for sure. Parts of his cyborg anatomy probably make it easier for him to feel okay with killing her, like with no issues, because of the option of making her eternal like him and unfeeling, taking feelings away, which he knows she would be all for.
Do you think when he took her in to begin with, this was something that he was maybe thinking about?
I don't know, because we always hear that he's unfeeling. He doesn't have emotions, but clearly he does. To me, I mean, pretty clearly he
wants a
developed.
friend.
Yeah, and hey, here's this lost child, lost girl, if you will, and that's unintentionally a preview of something that happens in the later books, but she is abandoned, and he takes this opportunity to almost take ownership over her. I think I think originally it was just a collector thing, and then over time they develop their teamwork and growing up stuff, right? I mean, I think it's hard to be around somebody through certain developmental years and not have some sort of attachment. It's just weird that he's not supposed to, but clearly develops those, which I think really opens up, like the artificial intelligence debate, and not quite what we're going to get into now, but there's a lot of really interesting topics that you could spin off and open those doors to along with that. So pick a question, 1 or 2, because 3 was unwittingly, were Hester and Greg friends? So we've kind of already covered that one.
Well, crap. Let's go 2.
2, would Tom and Catherine have been friends if their situation had been different? I feel like they were,
yeah.
but like I don't quite understand the
closer, maybe, I guess.
That's a weird question to me. Like I feel like their situations put them to meeting just at unfortunate time, but I think they connected on certain things pretty quickly that like-minded. I don't know. That's kind of a weird question to me.
A bit, yeah.
So, yes, they would have been friends to me in almost any situation.
More friends.
More friends. More time. More than, hey, like an hour. So another part of this is courage. We already talked about. I mean, admiration. And one of the big things here, obviously, is Tom and his admiration for Valentine, right? And I'm going to go ahead and just ask this question because I saw this one earlier. Anna Fang is arguably as heroic as Valentine. I think that's pretty true. Why doesn't Tom admire her the same way he does Thaddeus Valentine?
I mean, he's not grown up around the tales of Anna Fang's greatness.
Right. Yeah, this is what he grew up reading every single book and every single story, and then meeting him and having that kind of affirmative, this dude's
My
awesome
hero
moment.
in the flesh.
Right, right. And also,
Yeah.
when I think Tom was what, like 12, and he wrote a paper and got some kind of award for the paper that he wrote in the historian classes or whatever. It was Thaddeus Valentine who came in and presented the award to them. And as soon as they meet in real life, towards the beginning of this book, outside of the award ceremony thing, I mean, instantly Valentine remembers him. I mean, that's a huge ego boost for Thaddeus, right? Or for Tom from Valentine. Yeah. When your hero makes it a point to remember who you are, that's a pretty good feeling, right?
Yeah, that's almost like, I don't know, if you met your favorite celebrity one time and then you see them who knows how many years later and they're like, oh yeah, I remember you. You were the person that did that one thing.
Oh yeah. Or even like on a smaller scale, like even in this podcasting world that you and I have spent a lot of time in. Say there's a show that you've listened to for hundreds of hours, right? You know, and you've chatted with him once. You even had him on your show or whatever, and then you go and see him at a con, and they're instantly like, hey, nice, we had a good time on that podcast that we did together. You're like, I didn't think he was going to remember that. Like, and it's a bit of an ego boost, and it feels good, right? I totally understand.
I've had that happen a few times.
Yeah, we're speaking from experience. It feels good. So, another part of this story is guilt, right? We have a lot of discussion from, I think, Thaddeus Valentine's viewpoint that I think he does live with a lot of guilt, especially towards the end, whenever Catherine really finds out and basically approaches him about all of these things. I think he starts feeling a lot of guilt for that. Was there anyone in particular you feel kind of embodied guilt throughout this story? It's probably not as much as it should be.
Definitely not as much as it should. I mean, no one really stood out as feeling it like they should.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
I'm kind of glimpsing through the questions real quick, but like, how much is Valentine to really blame? That's not really the right way of saying it. Like, so this is really kind of a combination of guilt and blame, right? Those really go hand in hand on this, and I don't think you can really talk about one without the other. And I do think that Valentine is probably the one that has the most guilt. I think Tom blames himself for a lot of things too. To me, like completely
needlessly.
Completely needlessly. And it's like, dude, unfortunately, you're kind of a nobody, and I mean that lovingly. Like, you didn't cause this shit. Like, stop taking it so personally.
You are not the reason why all of this happened.
Right.
Get over yourself.
Honestly, like, your major characteristic on how this adventure starts is a bit of overbelief in people. Like, it's a bit of an ignorant mindset of believing that the good guys are really good guys, believing that if you're a bad guy, you're just really a bad guy. And we get some of that from Tom as well.
He doesn't believe in the gray area.
Yeah, absolutely. Subscribe to Gray Area. She's awesome. But unrelated. But he really doesn't. And especially when you look at him trying to figure out how he feels about Thaddeus Valentine and not believing that what really happened and the stories he's heard actually happened about Thaddeus Valentine, to him personally even, but also the reverse, which we kind of got to, is Anna Fang, where he's like, oh, you're just an anti-Traction League son of a bitch, and I will always hate you. And she is like one of the realest people he's ever met, and he never seems to really give her a chance. So I feel like eventually when he learns more about her and has more experience with who she is, which I don't think we really described who she is. She's this kind of badass aviatrix who is part of the anti-traction league. These are people that live on the ground or in the air and aren't part of municipal Darwinism. They don't believe that cities should be eating other cities and towns, and they kind of see like we do almost. That's pretty awful.
I mean, it's cool in
it's a
theory.
neat idea. It doesn't make it okay. And I feel like once Tom learns more about who Anna Fang is as a person, he has some guilt towards how he treated her and how he wasn't very fair to listening to her side of the story because it's so ingrained in him as to what society is, and it's very binary between the two.
Yeah, I mean, when you grow up being told that this is the way things are, it's easy to understand why anyone uh, going against what you know to be is drastic. You don't agree with it. You see them as lesser
Mm-hmm.
when they're trying to come after your way of life.
Absolutely. Yeah, right. The enemy is always going to be the enemy no matter what you learn about them or their motives behind that, which I tend to give people a chance, even if I
And
disagree.
then you discover they're actually just people too.
Never. Those 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 mongrels.
They're not people.
No, they're not people. All right. So pick a question 2, 3, or 4.
3.
Is Catherine right to blame her father for his actions, or is Magnus Chrome to blame for controlling Valentine?
I mean, isn't it both,
It's
really?
both, I
Because
think.
Valentine, yes, Magnus is telling him what to do, but Valentine could always just say no.
Right. It's like his own
He made
personal
the choice
ambition.
to agree and to go
Yeah.
along with whatever Magnus was saying.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Even though
if anything, Catherine should be placing the blame on both of them,
yes,
but more so on her father.
yes, yeah, and maybe you look at it. I think if you wanted to try to justify it, it's more Magnus Chrome. I mean, he knows the pressures that he's putting on Valentine and the benefits that Valentine gets for his family. You know, he plays that whole family angle, but at the end of the day, he who pulls the trigger is just as much to blame. It's or more. I mean, it's you still made the final decision. So I think she's right to
Yeah,
blame both
no
of
one
them.
held a gun to his head and told him, you have to do this.
Right. Absolutely. So the very last thing, and I didn't put in our little list here, but this is a really quick one. Religion seems like it is not a big thing. There are many different religions, not many that we know now. You know, we live in a society where the top 3 religions have been around for 2,000 years or so. This is just another 1,000 years with some pretty mega huge historical turmoil in between. I get that. But do you think there's a reason that we don't see any kind of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, existing in this age of traction cities? What do you think?
Um, I mean, it could be a commentary on the fact that religion is supposed to bring people together and sort of just seems to divide people even more. And that perhaps that's part of the downfall of what led to the society as the way it is.
Yeah, like it makes me really wonder more about this 60-minute war, right? And what the motivations for it really were. And if it was a religious thing, and people after the fact were like, fuck that shit. Like that's what caused all this. And then you have that kind of rebounding, which I don't know, but then it's also still kind of odd that a place like St. Paul's Cathedral is still one of the primary, monoliths that London's traction town is set around. Like why do you think that could be? I guess like if it's not a big deal anymore, why keep the cathedral as a pinnacle?
I mean, it's still a sign of where you came from. That clearly there's historians on all of these, all of the larger cities at least, that
Mm-hmm.
are pillaging the smaller cities and finding historical items to potentially keep and put into their collection, if you will. So it's a sign of what brought us here, perhaps, and what we don't want to return to if that is what caused the war.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think the history portion of it is very very important, and also just the show of power that something like a cathedral has, not even in a religious sense, but just in bricks and mortar, bricks and mortar, Rick and Morty, bricks and mortar, architectural sense. I think there's a true power to the way those buildings are built, and that's truly their intention is to
Well, and they're
display.
standing the test of time
Right, especially on a
and
traction city.
uprooting an entire city.
Right, right. Or maybe it's just a lucky spot. It was like, you know what? It's gonna be too much of a hassle to take this fucker down. Let's
Or
just
like maybe it was the most structural point of the city, and they were just like, "Well, this is gonna be our center."
maybe that
Who
could
knows?
be. I don't know. So I think that does it for our main chat here. So Bailey, I'm gonna come to you on our next section here. What was one thing you really loved about this book?
My mental visualization of cities just like Pac-Manning other cities. I really I love it so much.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh.
in all honesty, it's that technological with technological leaps with limitations thing that gets me. I think the characters are great. I think there's some real fun things. There's a real levity to this book. There's some genuine humor, I think. The relationships feel good. A lot of them are very short lived. This really doesn't take that long of a calendar amount
Mhm.
of time to get this whole story, but I think it is the kind of first thing we talked about with the technology that has some really huge limitations, and I mean that's kind of how I think about things, is technologically based, and history and technology is one of my favorite things. So I that really fascinates me, and I think it's done pretty well getting explanations for things and leaving things open to interpretation too, which is allows us to do this. What would be one thing you hated about this book?
How many times they mentioned how hideous Hester Shaw is? I don't know. I really didn't hate much about this book.
Yeah, I'm with you. I That's the one thing reading it, even the very first time, I was like, man, like he being either the author or Tom Natsworthy is just so focused on appearances. Like I couldn't agree with you more. It's the one
How
thing,
ugly is she?
right? Like I'll tell you in the movie, it's not that ugly. I'm just gonna throw it out there. But she has a scar. Like okay, I don't know, and maybe the movie, you know, washes it up a little bit. Not as bad as not as grotesque, but that's probably the thing that is the most off-putting, is just the attention to people's appearances, and it's pretty heavy-handed at times, I think. Um, but other than that, there aren't too many things that I dislike about this book. I think it's a fun adventure story, and there's a lot of good things in there. You know, commentary on modernization, and it's a town eat town world. I think that really does kind of sum it up pretty well. So
Mm-hmm.
I've read forward in this series. I'm almost finished with the very last book. I've read everything else. That's a major novel or the prequel short stories for this. But Bailey, you've only read book one.
I
What?
have read one and
Oh, you
two.
read two as well. I forgot about that. That's right.
Yes.
So I guess from where we're at here, what would you say are some of the biggest unanswered questions that we have to move into book 2 or beyond?
I mean, just like, where does society go from here?
Mm-hmm. So the
I
big
think is my
finale
biggest question.
of the book is London literally being blown up, all of it, the entire town, the entire city, just totally destroyed. Catherine sacrificing herself, Bevis Pod sacrificing himself to make that happen. And the only two characters that we know for sure, like, that are in that London area that get away are the two that are on the Jenny Hanover, and that is Hester Shaw, not Shore, and Tom Natsworthy. So they fly off, and it seems like they've truly developed a friendship. And she kind of
Yeah,
says, "It doesn't matter where we go, as long as I'm with you, it's cool," kind of thing. And that's nice.
we'll
Um,
figure it out.
so yeah, I think the big question for me is, one, like, is there anything from London that's salvageable at all? And how's that going to play moving forward? And also, where are those two characters going? And yeah, and how do
Well,
they
and who is gonna
live?
be our next big bad?
Yeah, what new issues are going to come up? Because this is a quartet. Not too many book series are 4 books, fundamentally 4 books, which I like that. I feel like people usually skip over the 4 book series, but that's good. It's good. It covers a lot of
Mhm.
different things. So I definitely encourage you to check out this book and the other ones. Which gets us to final thoughts and would you recommend? Bailey, any final thoughts?
I really enjoy the premise of this book and this series, and just, I don't know, it's kind of fun and whimsical to imagine a city just being lifted up off of its foundation, if you will, and put on some wheels and just, well, let's go drive our town to the continent of Africa today.
Mm-hmm.
So I really enjoy that, and I would absolutely recommend reading this book.
Yeah. Are you excited to watch the movie this weekend?
I am excited to watch the movie. Ever since we saw the
I
preview,
know.
it looked amazing, and I have still yet to watch it. So
You think you're gonna watch it before then?
maybe I need to get some thoughts.
Right. Right. Um, yeah. So my final thoughts on this book. It. I mean, I think we very much agree on this. It's a fun book. It's good action. Maybe the characters are a little thin at times, but I almost get a series of unfortunate events vibe from some of this as well, and maybe some of that comes from this kind of steampunky feel that I just remember back to the series of unfortunate events movie with Jim Carrey. Very much had that feel, and I think even the Netflix show kind of jumps into that realm as well. But some of the way that some of the characters are written makes me think of the way Lemony Snicket writes some of his characters. Some of them are a bit caricature, right? And like, oh man, whenever we meet Chrysler Peavy, who is the pirate Peavy, and shows us one of the darker sides of municipal Darwinism. I think he's a pirate that takes over this town, but then guess what? He really just wants to become respectable, and he wants to become a Lord Mayor and just basically keep growing his city. And it he
We're
wants
gonna turn this into a legitimate operation.
right, and good thing Thomas Natsworthy's here. He grew up in the second tier of London. He's a proper gentleman, and he's going to teach my men how to become proper gentlemen, so we can all become respectable and eat cucumber sandwiches that are cut into little triangles. It's a whole thing. Like
Hey,
they're,
delicious.
I believe it. I mean, it sounds great, but that's just like those are the kinds of characters that made me think a bit more in the Lemony Snicket realm of characters. There's a few of them that are very much just caricatures of a thing, but I don't think that hurts it at all. That kind of adds to some of the levity and it
Mm-hmm.
simplifies it. It's not
It's
really,
some of the charm.
yeah, I think so. And there's some genuine humor throughout it. I would definitely recommend this book and this series in general. There are some shortcomings, but overall, this is a solid 4.5 out of 5 for me. Would you want to put a star rating out of it?
I'd go with like a solid 4.
Yeah. I think that's what you put on Goodreads too. Not that I was creeping on your Goodreads, but that's what you put. So,
You know, feel free to check it out.
yeah, you guys can feel free to creep on our Goodreads as well. We should put links to that. I should put links to our Goodreads in the
You should.
descriptions. So I will do that
Get
moving
on
forward. But you can also check out the links below in the description to either find links to buy this audiobook, to buy the novel, or to buy the movie, and we will get a nice little kickback for that. So please check that out. Both of us recommended this book, so what are you waiting for? I mean, come on, people. Use an Audible
Don't
credit
you trust
card.
us?
Come on. We talked about it for an hour and a half, so it's got to be good. But until then, thank you very much for joining us. We hope you check us out on the socials of Twitter and Instagram at Gets Lit Podcast.
You can also hit the like button, which helps us out a lot, and please make sure to check out the links in the description below this video to find other ways of supporting our channel, buying this book, and much more, as Luke mentioned.
I should have read that before I did my thing. Yeah, no, do that. That's why we wrote it down. This show and all of our shows at thepodcastthat.com and here on Drawbridge Media are produced with the love and support of our wonderful Imaginary Legion patrons. You can learn more about our awesome reward tiers and other ways you can help support us by joining our Imaginary Legion at patreon.com/stayimaginary.
And we hope you'll join us next time when Lee Westfall has a strong, loving family. She has a home she loves and a loyal steed. She has a best friend who might want to be something more. She also has a secret. Lee can sense gold in the world around her. When we read Walk on Earth a Stranger by Ray Carson. And until next time, just keep reading.
And until next time, stay imaginary. Bye.